blue skies open, naturally at peace. The mountains are forgiving, the forest lets you sleep. And if you are a traveler, there is a golden road, destination Pacific Northwest, a future to unfold. Take on a Spokane rhythm, bring the kids along. Been living, come on children, sing a family song. Take on a Spokane rhythm, bring the kids along. Wondrous places, smiling faces, there the world is on.
In 1974, Spokane, Washington became the site of the first sustainability-themed World's Fair. That summer, the fair brought millions of visitors to Spokane, transformed the downtown area, and marked a turning point in our journey to revive the beautiful Spokane River. 2024 will mark the 50th anniversary of Expo 74, and as we approach this anniversary, it is important to reflect upon the progress we've made as we remember why we must continue to restore, protect, and connect with the Spokane River.
So my name is Warren Saylor. I'm a member of the Spokane Tribe. I work for the Spokane Tribe out of the Department of Natural Resources. Growing up, you wouldn't have known that we were a river people because one, we were pushed out of the city of Spokane, but secondly, we were pushed off of the river when the Grand Coulee Dam and other dams flooded the river system. That pushed us up higher into the mountains, and so we were more of a big game tribe rather than a fishing tribe, because the fish had all gone away. The same fish that had supplied us food for over 10 to 20,000 years. So my understanding of the river came a little bit later in life. As my grandparents was explaining that importance of the river, or that connection between the Spokane tribe and the river, then I began to understand that connection. So the biggest connection for me is I've came to learn more about the Spokane tribe's history. It's that deeper connection between the river and the tribe itself. So the tribe being here since time immemorial, or meaning basically 15 to 20,000 years, is about the time frame today's science tells us that we've been here. Oral tradition tells us that we've been here since about the break of the Ice Age, when science will tell you that the Missoula floods had resided and bare land in and around the city of Spokane became available for inhabitants. From that time forward, the Spokane tribe and its membership started that connection between the river and the tribe. And that larger connection was what was in the river, what was brought to us from the ocean, and that was the salmon, steelhead, shellfish, and eel. And so for all those years, the river meant everything to us. And I think that's probably continues to this day, is that the connection between people, if they're tribal or not, and the Spokane River, part of what's missing is that understanding of its importance. Because for those 14,000 years, which is about 700 to 1,000 generations ago, it was the soul of the people that lived here. And today, I think that's part of what's missing, is because we don't view the river as that soul. But the river is why they came. And that historically, that's why it's important to me, is that understanding or that connection between what the river was, what brought other European Americans here to want to live upon the river, and what it is today. And so it's that connection just between the river and everything that it contributes to people.
Okay. No, I'm Nick Deshay. I'm the editor of The Inlander, and I've been a journalist in Spokane for about 15 years. I love the river. I should step back a little. I just like thinking about cities and how cities come to be and why they exist. And a lot of cities are built on the river or on a river of some sort. And so I always think a lot about like, well, why? Is it commerce? Is it aesthetics? Why do people want to settle near these places? And so if you think of history, like the indigenous people from around here, the tribal folks, the falls drew them here on a regular annual basis. Not just the people who lived here, but all kinds of different tribes would come and meet and kind of share the river's wealth. So that always, I don't know, that just pleases me to think like we humans are still tied to these natural geologic features, And then beyond that, when, European descendants came, they also were drawn to the river in more of a commercial sense, I guess, of like how to move the logs down the river or whatever. I'm not too familiar with that part of the history, but clearly something drew people to this part, like whether it was the salmon or whether it was the mills they could build on the river. This was like a locus for people to be, and to this day, this is the urban heart of the inland Northwest, is centered on the waterfall and on the river itself.
The confluence of the Spokane and the Hangman Creek constitutes the oldest continuously occupied city in the state of Washington, in the present-day state of Washington. We have to look at the word city with new set of eyes, because the archaeologists said that cities defined in this way has been continuously occupied, and so that history goes back 8,000 years. And so that was really eye-opening for me that the tribes go back that far, and the place where they gathered, where that city was, that's the confluence of those two watercourses. And quite coincidentally, in Expo 74, perfect for your project here, in 1974, that was also a gathering place for the counterculture that couldn't afford to stay in hotels when they came to Spokane for the Expo 74. And you probably know that chapter in the book about that.
The river is the lifeblood of our community here in Spokane. However, it was not always treated or seen as such. Following the arrival of James Glover and the timber industry in Spokane, the river spent many years being polluted and disrespected. A beautiful and plentiful resource for food and life was being depleted and trashed. The World's Fair was Spokane's opportunity to transform the overcrowded and railroad-dense downtown area and reinstate the Spokane River as the centerpiece of our community.
This summer, the Pacific Northwest is host to America's only World's Fair in this decade, Expo 74, a different World's Fair. Different because Expo 74 goes beyond gathering nations together to wonder at the marvels of technology, challenging nations to seek harmony between industry and environment. Expo 74 is a forum for international cooperation, imagination, and celebration. Celebration for tomorrow's fresh new environment.
My name is David Evans. I'm an architect here in Spokane, and I was the chief site designer for Expo 74 and did a few of the pavilions out there, Afro-American Pavilion and the Joy of Living Pavilion and Northwest Airlines exhibit. And I'm working on this Expo Plus 50 right now.
And I'm David's wife, Becky, and we married back in '71, so I just jumped right in with him.
As an adult, and when I got involved in Expo 74, I realized that the river had been blocked off from the city, and the city was beginning to deteriorate. And fortunately, the Expo was able to really help that.
As I watched you do the design, the emphasis for your design was not really for the fair as much as the residual park. All of the decisions on how to do it, the fair was what enabled the park to happen. And you seem to be trying to get that land as close to where it was before the white settlers came. You know, that's what your kind of dream was, that somehow we could have an actual natural park right in the middle of town.
Yeah.
For people who work downtown to use the right brain to go and be restored.
Yeah. I think that it basically accomplished what we set out to do. And that was to, one, energize downtown Spokane by getting the railroads and the buildings out of there, creating a park. And I think that we're pretty successful at that. When you go out to Riverfront Park now, you know, you feel like, you know, it's a good thing to have there.
Hi, I'm Tom Shine, and I had the great fortune to work on the Expo 74 site development almost 50 years ago. I can tell you, since you know David Evans, I got a call from him in 1972, which was the year I earned my architectural license, and he asked me if I'd be interested in coming down and talking to Tom Adkisson about working with that group on the design team for the site. So I did that, and I ended up taking the job and spent most of the time for 2 years working on the site design in different areas. And you know, the fair came about to save the riverfront and to save the downtown. So there was a lot of financial motivation by property owners and business people. And it was after Northtown had been developed. So cities like Spokane are unique in that they saved their original core when everybody else was going to the suburbs around the country. And it succeeded. J.C. Penney built a new store downtown during that. Nordstrom moved downtown. They weren't doing those kinds of retail places elsewhere in the country. So it was a good thing. The concept of getting rid of the railroad tracks on the site was phenomenal, you know, and obviously, maybe it isn't so obvious, but the local business people, the landowners and businessmen, bankers and others wanted to save downtown. And so over a period of years and a number of studies, which Dave Evans participated in before the Expo site development work began, the concept of saving the river and making it into the park of the future was a great one. It's just such a natural amenity that a city has. In fact, the original name of the city was Spokane Falls, Washington. And for some reason back in the early 1900s, they dropped the word falls. But that's, you know, we all know how beautiful that is when the water is running full in the springtime. It's just incredible waterfall.
About 6 months before the World's Fair opened, I was asked to make a presentation in front of the board of directors of the World's Fair as to who was going to come. All I could tell them was that there were a couple of artists who had already signed their contracts, and they were big artists. Bob Hope to play in the Coliseum, and Liberace to play for a week in the Opera House. But I could not tell them about the other myriad number of artists that we had sent contracts to, but they hadn't signed and sent them back yet. And so I couldn't discuss that. And so they said, well, what's going to happen? What is going to happen in this 6 months of the World's Fair? And so I made the statement that we were going to be the center of entertainment in all of this country for 6 months. And I could almost feel the groans that came from the back of the hall. Oh, sure, yeah. well, I guess we'll have to accept that for whatever. Well, the newspaper printed basically a little story about my presentation and how I had said that we were going to be the center of entertainment for the entire United States, over Las Vegas, over New York, over Boston, whatever. And so the contracts came in, and came in, and came in, and artists now were clamoring to try to get to Spokane, Washington. In June, finally, the newspaper printed another article. And in this one, they said that a few months ago, we kind of were astonished to hear that Spokane was going to, quote, be the center of entertainment for 6 months. But doggone it, we were, and we are.
Spokane, Washington is a living expression of what Expo 74 is all about. The hope of progress without pollution. The builders of Expo 74 reclaimed from urban blight 2 islands in the Spokane River. Until recently, these islands were a network of abandoned railroad tracks and empty warehouses. That's all gone now, and today these islands are the site of Expo 74, the core of a city reborn. Along the banks of the Spokane River, the fairgrounds converge with the central city in 100 acres of quiet pathways and grassy knolls. At Expo's close in early November, its parks and gardens will become a vital legacy to the people of Spokane, a memorial to man's commitment to his environment.
So I'm Marlene Feist. I'm the city's public works director. I've been at city government for almost 25 years now, serving in communications and then in public works roles. So public works for us is water, sewer, garbage, and streets. So you can see how those lines of business interact with the river, obviously. So we're continuing to work on ways to continue to keep pollution from going into the river. So we completed this whole massive project around, we have combined sewers in the city, where stormwater and wastewater sewers are combined. And they can become overwhelmed during periods of like a heavy storm, or if there's snow on the ground and then it rains on that and you get this sort of extra water in the system, and that's when they would overflow. So we put in 16 million gallons of storage next to City Hall and across from the library as sort of the representative of that system. It's a great, beautiful plaza overlooking the river. And underneath it is a sewage treatment facility, right? So it's a big tank. It's a 2 million gallon tank, one of the largest in the city's system. And so that, to me, that plaza and what's below it is almost representative of what I think the future is, which is we need to care for the river, but we also need to show the river off, provide that connectivity to the river, and that's how we'll keep it clean and available for our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, people we may never meet. But that is the legacy that we want to leave for our community that way. And we're going to continue to look at ways, as technology advances, how we can continue to make that wastewater treatment even better, even better. We know that new technology will come along, and we're going to be in a position to be able to invest in that technology and make the quality of how we interact with the river even better.
Now we're good.
All right, perfect. So my name's Garrett Jones, and I'm the director with the City of Spokane Parks and Recreation Division. Been the director for over 4 years now, but been with the department since 2008. When we look at Riverfront Park now and where Expo was, so many didn't even know that there was a river down there, or even knew that there was such thing as the Spokane Falls. And so being able to capitalize on that. And you know, when Expo came and had that significant collaboration around the environmental, but I would also say with the cultural significance of bringing the world to Spokane, continue to capitalize on that and continue to growth, because environmental initiatives then are a little bit different now. And I think we found some of that during our renovation project of Riverfront Park that started with the bond that passed in 2014. And if it wasn't for that Expo, we wouldn't have that success today in the renovations that we had today and the citizens were able to pass. And when I think of, when Expo came and then left, and it was Riverfront Park, unfortunately, there was a gap in time since about 1975 until the renovation. There was a lot of neglect in Riverfront Park. And so being able to capitalize on that momentum from Expo and our renovation in 2014, where that bond pass was huge. And then continuing those environmental initiatives. Our goal around connections to the river, the cultural significance of when we were looking at our master plan, and then dealing with what we call the dirty dirt. And we designated Riverfront Park as a brownfield because the soils in 1974 were not dealt with like they are today. And so we just actually won a national award for a brownfield award for Riverfront Park, of how we took the contaminated soils that were left behind from Expo and the industrial railroad before, and being able to clean that up for today's standards. And that's something that we're pretty proud of. I think in the next 50 years for Riverfront Park is to truly, we have the backbone, we have that foundation now. It's really that community gathering place. So it's however the community wants to adapt and use that space. And I think that is what we're super proud of in that particular space. And for us, that next 50 years, again, is taking the elements of what we've done already and being able to continue to grow across the community. Unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of investment in our neighborhoods for a very long time, decades. And that is, from a Parks and Recreation standpoint, that is our next call to action, is to use the momentum of Riverfront Park and our Spokane River and being able to use that to broadcast that across all neighborhoods. And a lot of that too is, completing a lot of the trail gaps, adding more access points along the Spokane River, restoration work along a lot of our shorelines. Parks and Recreation, we own about, I want to say it's 13 or 15 miles of shoreline that we own on the Spokane and Latah Creek area, and there's some restoration work that needs to be there as well. And then to continue to be able to celebrate our cultural history, our environmental history, and continue to build off of that and use Riverfront Park as that platform. Because we get a lot, you invest a ton into downtown, you continue to invest a lot into downtown. Well, it's now time to take that and be able to spread that out to our neighborhoods.
My name is Jerry White Jr. I'm the executive director of the Spokane Riverkeeper. I'm also a lifelong resident of the watershed and the Columbia River watershed, and I actually live within earshot and eyesight of the river right now in the city of Spokane. Today, the common lens through which our newcomer population, and by that I mean the last 150 years, aside from the indigenous cultures that have been here for thousands upon thousands of years, the new coming generations that have been here in the last 100 to 150 years have used an English common law system to protect the river. That is, we all have operated from a legal policy and psychological paradigm that the river is property and the river is common property, and its value is derived from its utility to us as human beings. So therefore, if polluter X is dumping pollution in the river and disturbs my ability as part common law owner of the river to catch fish, then I can go to the courts and provide evidence that I've been harmed, my uses have been harmed, and try to protect the river so that my uses of the river will be honored. We need in the next horizon to outgrow this paradigm and begin to understand our river as a living entity that requires and deserves protection in and of itself simply by virtue of its own existence. That is to say, we don't need to throw out the Clean Water Act. It's useful and it needs to be retained and improved, but we need now to look at affording our river rights to exist. And that means acknowledging that the river is a living entity and deserves protection apart from its utility to people. That's the next horizon. And that's a horizon we have to go meet if we are to have a river and a world that's worth living in to pass on to future generations.
It's undeniable that Expo 74 had an impact on Spokane's efforts to restore and sustain the river. Though it may not have been an immediate transition to total stewardship of the river, it definitely created a spark for engagement. As we look to the next 50 years of Spokane and the Spokane River, it's important to remember the journey the Spokane River has been on and to continue to center our city's identity around this powerful river that runs right through our city.
When you come to Spokane, you become a part of the Pacific Northwest. Come to Spokane and camp the Cascade Mountains. Challenge Mount Rainier. Come to Spokane and fish the Columbia River. Explore Sun Valley. Come to Spokane and Jasper and Vancouver. Come to Spokane. This summer, the Pacific Northwest is Expo 74. So, come to the World's Fair. It's all here. Every bit of it.